Well, hello everyone. Today we're here to talk about Hero's Journey. Do you gentlemen have your book copy? I think Sam has a different version and newer and souped up version. Great. Well, I'm here today with Steve from Heroic Book Adventures and Sam from Captain Samuel's Sigils. Good afternoon, guys. I should say it's morning for me in Osaka, but um, I wanted just to first have you guys talk a little bit about your channels and what you're hoping to do with your channel. Sam, would you like to kick it off?
Sure. So basically, I'm a starship captain from the year 3485 that's been shunted backward in time to what we would call modern times. And because of that, I have a different perspective on literature. In my time, diversity was something that was really celebrated. We weren't at war with one another. It was very peaceful, halcyon time. And so when I read books, I really enjoy books that, promote diversity, have some kind of positive spiritual message, and try to make the world a better place. That being said, it's got to be attached to some kind of an adventure narrative. I don't like books for people who are just sitting around kind of pontificating. That doesn't interest me. And so a book like Hero's Journey that's got a message about caring for the earth while also going on this great adventure through post-apocalyptic Canada, exactly the kind of book that I like. So those are the types of books that I look at on my channel. Mostly vintage stuff, but a little bit of modern things so I can kind of work in more diverse authors. And I'm also in the process of writing a novella called The Book of Genesis, and that should be out soon. And that's a story about another post-apocalyptic world where one of the mutants on it is created as a soldier, and it goes through a journey from destroyer to redeemer. So I have some occasional things on my channel about the books that I'm writing, or just kind of writing vlogs and that kind of thing. A lot of my videos are just kind of talking head, to be honest, but occasionally I try to get some zaniness in there, so it's a little bit more interesting. But as long as I never include um, tons of memes and sound effects, I'll probably never make it big on YouTube.
Well, I think what you're doing is really interesting, and I'm definitely in accord with you for no books with too much navel gazing. That's for sure.
Yeah.
And I really like your playful vibe. You have the time you for Gulliver of Mars, that review, you dressed up in some
Oh
kind of
yeah.
outfit related to the to the story, and also you're very funny um, kind of tour of your equipment and studio, etc. That was really
Oh
good.
yeah.
Your
It's a
how
low
you
budget
make your
outfit over
thumbnails.
here, that's for sure. Cool.
Great. Well, thank you for coming on today. And how about you, Steve?
Well, where Sam is from the future, I'm from the barbaric caveman past. So I don't know. I'm all about classic fantasy, but I also do a lot of science fiction as well, and historical fiction, horror, a lot of horror too. So all variety of things. And I don't limit myself to any time periods. I could read anything from the 1800s up till something that was just released this year. So whatever, I'm up for reading pretty much anything.
Sure seems
And
like you
it's
got a wide variety of books.
yeah, and I just started the channel in April, so it's relatively new, but I've received a lot of positive, encouraging comments and that. So it's been fun. That's most important, is that we do these channels and have fun. So
Yeah,
it's been a
exactly.
good
Yeah.
time.
Yeah. Well, I know you and I had a conversation, on my channel a while back, and I'm aiming to get Sam on again in the future at some point for one of those. But I thought this is a good time to pull Sam in for this conversation because I believe, if I'm remembering correctly, Sam was one of the ones that introduced Lanier and Hero's journey to you, Steve. Is that right?
Yeah, I was talking about in one of my videos how I enjoy animal companions. So he pointed out because this one has a riding moose and a bear in it. So, and it was funny because it was like that day he pointed that out to me. I'm like, okay, that sounds pretty cool. I'll check it out. And then another channel, like a day or two later, Zara's Books did a video. I think she was talking about like books where the world itself is like its own character. And it just seemed like, okay, I got two people telling me about this book. Obviously, I need to check it out. So that was what made me grab it.
Yeah, well, it's definitely got the world is its own character in this one, that's for sure.
Oh,
Um,
absolutely.
well, and how about you, Sam? How did it come into your sphere of influence there?
Well, I actually heard about it from Richard over at Vintage SF. So
Oh, that's
he did
right.
a review on it, and I was like, "Oh, that
That's
sounds
right.
cool," and just kind of put it on my book wish list, and happened to suggest it to Steve, but I hadn't read it yet until now because there's just so many good books to read, so many good books to read.
That's a truism for sure.
Yeah.
Well, the funny thing with me, excuse me, is I did read this book years and years and years ago, but I didn't read it first. I came across the sequel,
Hmm.
Unforsaken Hero, or The Unforsaken Hero, in a library hardback copy at my local library back in the 80s. And that looks interesting. What's this slug creature talking to this dude in the front here? And I read it and really enjoyed it. And then I went back and got the first one. So, but this was a lot of fun for me to reread this because I haven't read it for, like I said, probably 35 years, but it held up well for me. So let's talk a little bit about your expectations from just what you were you expecting, and did you think they were met? We'll go into detail later, but what did you think of? What were you looking to or expecting to find in a book like this called Hero's Journey, and with a riding moose or morse on the cover and a bear doing the house signal to the to the greeting to the character there? What did you, Steve? What did you think? Just before you went into it.
Well, I just wanted to point out on the cover too. Do you know who Jim Croce is by chance?
It's a singer,
The
right?
singer songwriter from the 70s. All right. Well, Hero on here looks just like Jim Croce. So to me, it looks like Jim Croce's playing patty cake with the bear. So
If
that's just
I
immediately
remember
what I
right, Jim
thought.
Croce had a lot more hair up here, though,
Well,
right?
yeah, well, he's wearing a little hat on here, but yeah. So, it's a nice Daryl K. Sweet cover, and I always like all those.
Oh
But
yeah,
yeah,
sweet is sweet.
I really didn't know what to think. I expected it to be a wilderness adventure, which sounded cool. And that was about it. I really had I've never heard anybody review it before going into it, so I no clue. Just went into it
Yeah, I
with an
think
open mind.
well, you usually do that with most books. I think this one's kind of a little forgotten classic, I guess. I would use the word classic. I'm not sure everyone else would. There seems to be some people who are not as fond of this book. I don't see any haters out there particularly, but not some people who think it's a little, didn't quite hit the mark for them. Sam, how about you? What did you expect going in? Was it pretty much the same as Steve?
Well, going into this book, I was coming off a number of books that kind of focused on anti-hero, almost villainous protagonists. And I was really looking forward to this as like a palate cleanser. We've just got this clear-cut, clean and honest hero story of, good versus evil, and it totally delivered on that. I really liked it. It was very refreshing.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's the one thing some reviewers might have said. I was remarked about a certain innocence or naivete in the book a little bit, and maybe that's true, but it is just a straight ahead, hell
Yep.
for leather kind of adventure, I think.
Yeah, and
So
I like that. Yeah,
yeah, I definitely like that too. And sometimes you get your belly full of mopey anti-heroes.
exactly. Not every book has to be, complicated or deep. And even though this was a straight ahead adventure, I was able to get, some pretty deep meaning out of it. As we'll talk about later, I wrote down some quotes from Aldo the Elevener. So, this book could
Oh
be deep
yeah.
if you wanted to, but on the surface, I loved it. Just straightforward hero adventure. Good stuff.
How about you, Steve? Did you enjoy it?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it's pretty good. I would
Yeah,
say at times it gets a little bit repetitive.
yeah.
It almost made it feel like it's one of those. It's a 300-page book, but it kind of feels more like a 400 or 500-page book kind of
Oh really?
thing. But that being said, it was good. I did enjoy it. So,
I think it is dense in some ways as far as the
Yeah,
descriptive detail,
dense is a
and
good
it's
one.
it's interesting detail, but it's it's quite descriptive. And I kind of pat myself on the back. I have a pretty good vocabulary, but there's some words in there I didn't know what they were. So he had quite a few interesting words that that he threw in there. But I think it did give a good. You're right. It probably maybe some of the journey did seem a little repetitive in parts, but it really gave you the feeling, I think, in my opinion, that you were really along for the ride. You were really
Oh yeah.
trudging through the wilderness with them. So. All right. Well, let's talk a little bit about Sterling E. Lanier. I don't know if you guys learned or read much about him, but I went to a couple of different sites to get some information on him because one of the things that always made me curious is why didn't he ever finish off this trilogy? Now, the second book is not a cliffhanger. I mean, it ends in a pretty good place for everyone, but there's things that aren't wrapped up completely. So, and I fully expected after reading these back in the 80s that he was working on the next one. And obviously, he wasn't a prolific guy. It took 10 years between Hero's Journey and Unforsaken Hero to get those out. So, and his other book, Menace Under Marswood, came out the same year. So he had two from Del Rey in '83. So that was a very prolific year for him. But I'll just give you a little background on him. He was an editor first. In fact, he is the one that championed Dune as a published novel. So Frank Herbert's Dune. Now, Dune had already been, at least in part, published in magazines, a sci-fi magazine, but he's the one that brought it to his. He was working for a small company called Chilton Books, which I guess was more of a, I think it was like talk car books and kind of more nonfiction stuff. And then he brought it to them and championed it. They published it. It didn't really do well for them, but it did go on and do very well for some other publishing house. Apparently, over around 20 or more publishers had turned down Dune. Can you imagine that back in the day? So before Lanier did that,
Oops.
yeah. But they're kicking themselves after that. But he was born in 1927 in New York City. He served in World War II in Korea. He studied archaeology and anthropology at the University of Pennsylvania. He was a lifelong cryptozoology enthusiast, which is, you can maybe see that in his in this book here. He was also a sculptor and had some of his works exhibited in the Smithsonian, among other places. So in 1965 he was working with that Chilton Books, and he was instrumental in persuading the firm to publish Frank Herbert's Dune. He read Dune World and Analog magazine. That's where it first appeared. And he was responsible for tracking down the author and conveying their offer, Chilton's offer. And despite his insight into its value, obviously it didn't do well for Chilton, and they took it out of release after a year. So from then on, Herbert never looked back, I guess. So he wrote not so many books. I think I counted. He wrote 13 Brigadier Fellows stories, including the peculiar exploits of Brigadier Fellows. His first 7 are in those. And then the Curious Quests of Brigadier Fellows, which I only have on a not great Kindle version. The hardback is very rare, although there are some on eBay for around $60 or so if you were that interested in it. But those stories are really cool. They're kind of in the Jorkins Tall Tale style, but they're not presented as tall tales. They're presented as very serious. This guy is deadly serious, and he's had these weird supernatural, mostly monster-based encounters. Very imaginative, very good stories. One of which, what was it? A father's tale, which is in the second book. One hit was a nominee. He made him a nominee for the World Fantasy Award in 1974. So he wrote those stories kind of scattered. They were mainly appeared in Magazine of Fantasy and Science Fiction before he put them in books. His first book was a children's story called The War for the Lot. And it looks really interesting. I might pick that up eventually. About a young boy who can communicate with animals, and there's a lot near his grandfather's farm in Connecticut, and there's some enemy encroaching. I don't know quite what it is. Maybe it's some kind of animal enemy, and they make this boy their general to help defeat these encroaching forces or whatever. And of course, he wrote the Hero's Journey in 1973, and Unforsaken Hero was published in 1983, and so was Menace Under Marswood. And then after that, nothing much was heard from him. Seems like he got into a bad car accident in Vienna in the 80s, and he was in a coma for a week. And after that, if he tried to write and concentrate too much, he would get terrible headaches, etc. So kind of curtailed his writing career. He might have had a series of strokes. I know he died from a stroke in Sarasota, Florida in 2007. So, but yeah, I think he's a very interesting writer. And, again, probably his absolute best writing are in those Brigadier Fellows stories. Although I think, he's plenty good enough for in his Hero's Journey book and the sequels. I haven't, it's been a long time since I've read Menace Under Marswood. I don't remember a lot about it. It's kind of, it feels a little bit like a Heinlein juvenile mixed with military SF kind of, but it was cool. So I recommend it if you ever want to check that one out. Okay, well, let's talk about Hero's Journey then. Steve, you want to give us a basic spoiler-free plot synopsis like you do so well on your channel there?
Sure, I can do that. Yeah, Hero's Journey is set in a far distant North America, 5,000 years after an apocalyptic event known as the Death. And the death fallout from it has, in the millennia since, caused a lot of mutations in the plant and animal life. So you get a lot of creatures that are like gigantic sized, and the wilderness is a very dangerous place to be. And there's even some people and animals have developed a telepathic ability, like a mind speak, where they can communicate with each other. So in what was Western Canada, there's a universal church which is trying to rebuild society, to be cooperative again and get everything working. But there's this enemy they're facing known as the unclean, who are evil basically and trying to just rule through domination. So the church believes that if it can get a hold of some of the old technology from the pre-death era, information and technology, it might help in their fight against the unclean and make the world a better place. So they've been sending out their priests to some of the old abandoned cities to see if they can find this info and tech. And our main character is Hiero Destine, who's one of the priests, and he's also trained as an outdoorsman and well trained in the mind sort of thing, communication. So he set out on one of these missions, and he heads out with his trusty riding moose named Klutz, who he has a telepathic connection with. So the two of them have been training for years together, and they have like a bond and a connection with each other. As soon as they head out, they very quickly run into a bear named Gorm, who Hiero finds that he can communicate with too, and finds that the bear is actually very intelligent. So this bear becomes part of their little party, and they go out on quite an adventure and run into all kinds of manner of vicious creatures.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. Vicious creature after vicious creature, gigantic creature after gigantic creature. Yeah, and of course the unclean. Yeah, Sam, you want to add anything to that? That you think that's a really good precis, I think. But anything else you want to comment on there?
The story felt episodic, even though it was one contiguous book. It definitely felt like it was episodes. So Hiero would get some kind of telepathic premonition that danger is about to appear. Then the danger would appear, and then they deal with it. And then he'd usually get some kind of ally or loot to kind of join the party. And some of those episodes are more interesting than others. Some were just kind of him and his buddies getting chewed up by mosquitoes in swamps, whereas in other one, he really encounters some bizarre creatures that were pretty interesting to read. And, I would agree with what Steve said earlier that I think the book was longer than it needed to be. It probably could have been condensed, and some of those episodes maybe getting excised from the book so it would be a little more concise. But overall, yeah, I loved it. And I think Steve definitely captured it.
Well, I think those are both of you make good points. It probably could have been excised some parts or tightened, but I think Lanier just had so many ideas of these creatures he wanted to present that he said, "Oh, I can't cut that out. I got to include that. Got to include giant woolly mammoth, and I got to include giant, huge toads or something, and all sorts of interesting creatures." But and I think I know some people slam books that do the and then this happened, and then this happened, and then this happened sort of approach. I've never personally, that's never bothered me, as long as what's happening is interesting. So I do think the what do they call it? The palude, the swamp time was a little drawn out, but maybe it felt drawn out to them. So they really Lanier wanted to communicate that feeling, but that probably could have been tightened. I don't know what you guys think. I felt the first half was probably stronger than the second half. Would you agree with that? The first half of the book was a little more interesting. I think after Brother Aldo comes in, as much as I like him, and then they're on the ship, there's still a lot of cool stuff happening, but somehow it's still very interesting. But I just found it a little less gripping than the opening when they were first, taking off on their journey there. But what do you guys? Did you guys have a particular favorite section of the book? If you could break it down into sections, Steve, do you have a?
I don't
Or do
know.
you think it all is pretty much the same?
I think it was pretty balanced throughout. I can see where you like the first half more because there's something like magical when they're setting out on this journey. You don't know what they're going to run into. All you're just being introduced to this new world that none of us are familiar with, and these creatures he runs into. And it's just, I can see where it's a little bit more magical in the first half in some ways. But I think the biggest draw to this book is those creatures he runs into, and then the situations that come about as a result of running into them. What's going to happen with it. So it's like this book was all about the world building, the interesting world, and the interesting creatures and people that inhabit it. So that was definitely the best highlight of it for me personally.
Well, I think I know a lot of people are going to hear world building and go, "Oh my God, not too much world building," but it's not
No,
slow, right? I mean, there's lots of
no,
stuff.
not at all.
I think he paces danger points very well throughout the book. Every few, even there's little rest and then danger time, little rest, danger time. I mean, it's constant barrage of attacks, I would say, for them. Sam, what do you think?
I thought the book was a bit like a snowball rolling downhill, where it starts where it's just him setting out by himself and the moose, and then Gorm shows up, and then the Princess Lushar shows up, and then he joins up with the ship captain and his crew, and then Brother Aldo the Elevener shows up, and as the party builds, they get to have grander and grander adventures until the very end, where they finally find that underground bunker. And now it's him and his whole crew going after bigger and bigger and wilder scenarios and monsters. So I would say that I kind of liked the second half a little bit better, just because it felt like that's what the whole book had kind of been building up to. But I didn't notice a huge difference between the two. I just was kind of at the end was like, all right, we're out of the swamp. We're done with the mosquitoes. Now we're fighting all these bizarre creatures and these bizarre set pieces with this wide cast of characters, and I really feel like now we're getting the payoff.
Well, I definitely was glad to get out of the swamp. That's for sure. I think, yeah, I definitely, I agree with you. I think, and that's good. That's what you would want a book to be building towards something, right? So, well, why don't we go into the spoiler zone because we're going to have to dig into some stuff more. I'll put some warning up saying spoilers in case anyone doesn't want to be spoiled. But if you don't mind, what I'd like to kind of start with, or maybe the we had kind of overall thoughts, I guess, of the book, but what about the characters? Let's talk about Hiero, the kill man, and the kind of. I first was always surprised that they put him down as, he's a priest, but he's a kill man as well as a skilled outdoorsman. So that seems like a contradiction in terms there that he's a kill man and a priest. But there have been warrior priests, of course, throughout history. So, what's your take, Sam, on the character of Hiero? What did you think about Hiero?
Well, first, I thought it was interesting that, yeah, he is a priest and a kill man. And what I liked about his character was he wasn't just like wasting bad guys, like he's in some kind of a Rambo movie. When he took life, he like kind of felt bad about it. Like, oh man, really stinks that I have to kill these creatures. But if I'm going to survive and save humanity and reach my destination, it's, a necessary evil. So he felt pretty consistent to me, and I liked him a lot. He didn't seem like a murderous killer kind of a hero. It was kind of like, hey, I've got this goal, and sucks that I got to do this, but I'm gonna make it happen. And the other thing that was interesting is that the majority of the good guys were all dark skinned people. So Hiero is actually, I think he was like a mix of French Canadian and like the indigenous people from Canada. And
yeah, they called him the Mets. So,
yeah, the
but they
Mets.
described him as copper skinned. So I'm guessing that's some kind of native Canadian
Yep.
mixed with uh, white guy, I guess. So he was a kind of mixed
Yeah.
race of some sort, right?
Yeah, so I like that. Luchar was presented as, I guess you'd say, African Canadian or African American. Aldo was the same. And I just thought that was interesting because in a lot of these older vintage books, the people with dark skin are kind of presented as like, the cannibals or the evil god worshippers. But in this, they were presented as like the heroes. And I thought that was pretty cool of Sterling Lanier to do that. And, I was wondering maybe why he did that. And I think maybe it's because of his anthropology background. So I just thought that was like a refreshing detail.
Yeah, because he could, even though it wasn't so early on, it was in a comparatively enlightened 70s, I suppose, where
Yeah.
there was, the green movement, the hippie movement, and all that perhaps coming to a close in some regards. But yeah, seemed definitely progressive that way, and I think he just looked at it in a, like you say, a very anthropological sort of way. Well, in Delaware, had a lot of African American kind of people down there, so it makes sense that in the South, more southern area, that they very well would be darker skinned. I think he's probably thinking of just a lot of mixing over time, over the 5,000 years. So there's probably not any sort of pure blood anywhere. Although I do like how the unclean, and we'll get to them. The unclean
Yeah.
are pasty white devils. So
Yeah, I've got some thoughts on that too for later. Yeah.
well, and also, you mentioned Hiero not wanting to kill. I think he changes his mind about some of the unclean. He doesn't seem to mind killing some of those with impunity later on.
Yeah.
But
He's
but
got
yeah,
enough
in
then,
general,
yeah.
he seems like a good guy, right? So that's good. How about you, Steve? What did you think of Pierre Hero or Per Hero Destine? It might be Hiero. I don't know. I think it always looked to me like it was just a play on words, Hero's Journey, so it should be pronounced Hero, but I know some people pronounce it Hiero because that can't be Hero. That's too on the nose. But anyway, what did you think of this character?
Well, yeah. I mean, the names of people, also the places, place names, and animal names. They're kind of a play on our modern language, but what it would evolve into. So, like instead of Canada, it's Canada. Instead of
Right.
the Atlantic Ocean, it's Atlantic.
Atlantic and Dalwa, right,
Chesapeake,
for Delaware. Yeah,
yeah,
Chesapeake.
Otwell,
Yeah.
yeah, a lot of that
I
stuff.
can't
So I
figure
like
out the pollude though. Do you know what the pollude refers to? Where did that come from? That doesn't
I think
seem.
that's well, I think that the sunken city that they come upon in the inland sea. I think maybe that was like the Toronto metropolitan area at one point. kind of thing. So I think the marsh that they went through would have just been something that evolved just from
Okay.
the sea. You know, all the basically the 5 Great Lakes became one big inland sea, and then it became marshy to the
Right.
north of it. So I think that was something that just would have developed over time, is what he's saying.
Yeah, some of the words obviously were newly made up by the people, I guess. Yeah. And of
Yeah,
course, Lee Mute for being lethal mutations and all that. Yeah.
sure.
Sorry, I
Yeah.
interrupted you though. What did you think about Hero?
Oh, he's a good character. Yeah, you could tell that his heart's in the right place and everything he means to do, and he thinks deeply. You know, he's just not responding to and just like, okay, I'm just going to do this or do that. He thinks about it, and there's even moments where he steps aside from everybody to just kind of meditate and ponder what the next move should be before just acting rash. You know, so yeah, I liked him as a character. He was pretty good.
What did you guys think of him being I'm assuming the is it, what do they call it? The Brotherhood of the Abbey or whatever, that's a Catholic offshoot. What did you think of him basically rolling bones for prediction, being a priest? You know, he has those little symbols that he rolls. Did that seem like a strange juxtaposition to you, or did you just roll with it? No pun intended.
Well, for me, I feel like, see, we're going into it thinking about what is a priest like today? What is the church like today? But Lanier was looking at it as after 5,000 years of a harsh living after this apocalypse, what would the church be like and what would its priests and servants be like? And I think that was him speculating about.
It was interesting speculation. That's a good point. Sam, what about you? Did you have any thoughts on the symbols that he sometimes rolls?
Well, I don't know if, that particular indigenous culture does that, but part of me wondered if maybe that was something that he took from that part of Hero's background, and that maybe that's something that they did and they combined it with the Catholic traditions. But that's just kind of speculation on my part.
Yeah, that's another good possibility too that hadn't occurred to me. Yeah, well, yeah, I think Hero is a very straightforward guy and very skilled in the wilderness, obviously, and I like how his encounters with uh, telepathic or telekinetic enemies strengthen his uh, abilities as he goes along. So, and he starts to kind of really, because you get the feeling that he was good, but not, the top of the class maybe in that particular aspect when he started out, but working with Gorm, trying to teach it to Lachar, and encountering the Snurg, is it this first encounter pretty early on, and
That's a
then
great name.
yeah, and then it's a great name, and then the dweller in the mist, I guess, and eventually the house and all that. He's getting stronger and stronger. So I thought that was a kind of nicely developed, and he was nicely grumpy occasionally too, which I also liked. He's especially with Luchar at first, the spoiled princess Luchar, who's actually pretty unspoiled as princesses go. But why don't we talk about her? What did you guys think? Well, actually, no. Let's go in order of how they appear. So, what are your thoughts on Klutz, Sam? The Morse.
Klutz felt a bit more like a background character. He didn't interact too much with Hero or kind of be too pivotal for the story. I kind of felt like Klutz was a foil for Gorm, honestly, to show that, yeah, there's some animals out there and you can talk to them a little bit, but they're still, pretty much down at animal intelligence. And then when Gorm comes along and you compare Gorm to Klutz, you kind of realize, like, wow, this is one smart bear. It's that human or maybe perhaps more than human intelligence. And so I kind of felt like Klutz was more of a background character, or like a foil to Gorm. But, he was all right. Didn't have any beef with him.
I think they had a couple of moments where even Hero was surprised by Klutz, though. Sometimes
Oh, yeah.
Klutz had it kind of that's another thing, a good side of Hero's character is he realizes when he's been dumb or made mistakes, and he does make quite a few mistakes, and he also underestimates his companions a few times there. We got a little wind coming in there. But I
Sorry,
think
I got
there's
a
some.
motorcycle coming on.
Oh, it's a motorcycle. Sorry. There is a. I do think Clutes has a couple of really nice moments though, like where Heroes wakes up and has him dribbling swamp juice on him and some stages, and how Clutes, is freaking out when Hero is fighting on the ship later, and he can't, he can't take part, and he wants to, because he's a battle Morse, and that when he, some of the things he does, like when they rescue Luchar, and he dives under and comes up under the canoe and splits it in half, and he has some moments to shine, I think. But yeah, Gorm obviously is, the more, I guess, rounded out character. What did you think about Clute, Steve?
I loved Clues. He might have been my favorite character. His loyalty and just, yeah, he had a more simple brain, but just the way he would stand guard while everybody else was sleeping, standing there chewing his cud. He was just
Yeah.
an integral part of the party, like everything about him. And it was so unique because we've seen people ride around on battle large cats and large wolves and things like that. But when have you ever seen a riding moose? Never. So I love that character. I thought he was unique and just made the book something different than it would have been with some other animal. I loved him.
Well, he's a pretty fearsome fighter too, doesn't he? Crack a couple of people's backs with his vicious four-leg kick, and toasting a bunch of those frog creatures with his massive antlers. And I like how occasionally, his antlers were peeling a bit, and Hero had to go over and scrape some off and stuff. So there was a nice bond between them, I think. Well, that's good. Let's go talk about Gorm a little bit. We'll start with you this time, Steve. What's your thoughts on Gorm?
Oh, he was cool, and I love the way they kind of picked on him at times too, calling him fat and everybody poke at his ribs like, you don't need any more food, bear. And he slept a lot because that's just what bears do. So they were calling him lazy all the time. But yeah, he was just another fun animal character, and of course more intelligent. And so I loved both of the animal characters. They made this a very unique book.
That's for sure. And he saved Hero's bacon a couple of times there,
Yeah.
especially at the beginning with Snurg there. But yeah. Now I'm not sure. Sam was saying in an email that he thought that he munched the guy's privates. I thought it was just his butt, but perhaps it was his privates that would have worked the most effectively.
Yeah.
What did you think about Gorm, Sam?
Well, the sentence says that he bites
On the
unclean
bottom or
wizard,
something, right?
yeah, in a most sensitive area, and so I assumed
I guess that makes sense. Yes,
but then a couple paragraphs later, it does imply that he bit him on the bottom. But until you get to that, I thought it was pretty funny. Like, wow, do they really have this, bear bite this evil wizard in the junk? Like, this is the book of me. But
well, that's gonna work to distract him.
Yeah, for sure. So, I loved Gorm. I thought he was cute. He really reminded me of my dog, how he kind of like snuffles around and is curious and real intelligent. And another book series that I love is the Bernstein Bears books. I really like those. I read them to my kids all the time. And my headcanon is that Gorm came down from the Bernstein Bears country to help out Hiero.
Those are the old ones that he was talking about, right?
Yep,
yeah.
That's right.
Paddington and the Berenstain Bears were sending him down to help Hero out. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, I liked Gorm a lot. He was cool.
Well, I do like the sleeping part where he's, they've had this vicious battle on the deck of what is it, the foam girl, the ship, and where Hero's battling the glyph, and Gorm comes out. What happened? What's going on after the whole thing's over? So, yeah, he was a very cool character. Steve, how about you? Oh, you mentioned. Sorry. How about Luchar, Steve? What's your thought on Luchar? Or could be Luchare. I don't know. I'm going to say Luchar. That's how I pronounce it in my head.
Yeah, she was an interesting character. We never got really into her background as a princess and what really happened and everything. A little bit, but
That comes
For,
more
for
into the fore in the second one.
yeah, okay, yeah. But she was not your typical princess. She was tough. She was capable and competent, and proved to be a pretty good companion overall for the group. So I enjoyed her inclusion into it for sure.
I think my one kind of demerit on the book is some of the back and forth with her and Hero is a little bit ham-handed, a little bit maybe. Um, some of the dialogue and stuff, but yeah, I liked how she was quite a go-getter. She wanted to learn telepathy, and she wanted to learn how to make a crossbow, and she was ready to throw down. So Sam,
Yeah.
what are your thoughts on Luchar?
Well, I thought it was again pretty progressive that Lanier had this, African American princess as a character. That being said, I didn't particularly care for Luchar. I thought that she was a little bit bratty and a little bit all over the place in her character. So, for example, she was portrayed as being extremely jealous and possessive of Hero, but then later in the book, there's kind of this elf dryad creature that is like, hey, do you mind if I bonk Hero? And Luchar is like, oh yeah, go ahead, do what you got to do.
Well, I think they implied that she was a little torn over it, but
Yeah, but that felt a
yeah.
little inconsistent to me. But it wasn't so much Luchar herself as you mentioned, the romantic interaction between Luchar and Hero, just felt really cringe. At the beginning of the book, it was implied that Hero had a number of lovers or girlfriends, but the way that the two of them spoke to each other,
Like
they were
teenagers.
like teenagers on like their first date, in
Well,
the
she
back of
was
their
a
parents'
teenager
car.
technically. Wasn't she 17 going
Oh yeah,
on
17.
18? What is it with these science fiction and fantasy writers with their underage girls? I mean, 17 pushing 18 is, pretty good. I'll give Lanier points for that compared to someone like Lynn Carter with
Oh
the,
yeah.
14, 15-year-old or whatever
And they
princesses.
do the swamp slop, so
They do the swamp slop. Yes, eventually.
there
Yeah,
you go. So yeah,
that's
that
true.
just that felt ham fisted to me, as you mentioned. And
I
would I
think
agree
once they
there?
got through that point,
Yeah,
it was better though because they were obviously kind of bonded to each other, and it was,
yeah,
um, But yeah, it was a little teeny boppery there for a bit. That's one
yeah,
kind of knock on the book I would give. Maybe it wasn't the most well done
yeah.
that way. What did you think their relationship? What did you think about that, Steve?
Yeah, it was okay. It's so hard doing romances right in books. I find them
True.
either just cardboard thin or really cringy. So I don't know. I'm not a good judge of a good romance in a book. I just like it to be there and not be ridiculous, and it's okay enough for me.
Yeah, I would
Or
say it passes. It squeaks through. Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
yeah,
Because we all know people in real life that when you first meet them, whether they're a coworker or a friend or whatever, your first time spent with them is not always perfect. You disagree with each other and takes time to learn about each other's differences. So I think it was okay
well,
as far as that went.
it's the old trope of that's been the bane of many guys having to sit through romance chick flicks with their with their significant others of the meet cute and don't like each other, but the attraction is there, sort of thing. But I think it's truncated in this a little bit due to circumstance. So uh, and Hero is presented as a pretty studly guy, so I could see why she would probably fall for him. But there is a little bit of a age gap there. I think I'm assuming Hero's in his 30s. I think early 30s. Is that your
All
guys' take on it? So no, he's basically hanging out with a 17-year-old. Of course, this is a different world. So
yeah,
like in the ancient time of our own world, 17-year-old in the Middle Ages was quite a bit different than a 17-year-old now. But yeah, but I didn't feel it was particularly icky anyway, so that was good.
Yeah.
yeah.
So
Same here. Felt all right.
And initially, it was an initial attraction for him. I mean, he did notice like, hey, she's kind of cute.
she's hot, yeah, but
Yeah, but he didn't look at it like, ooh, I'm gonna hook up with this chick. it was more like she was kind of a burden.
Yeah, she
But
was a burden. What am I going to do with her? Sort of
yeah,
thing. Yeah.
so it didn't start out as like romantic right off the bat.
Yeah. Yeah. I like how, yeah. So overall, it worked well enough. I don't think it was the most successful part of the book for sure. But I do like how she was, other than a few bratty moments, she was a pretty proactive character in a lot of cases. So I do, and she saves Hero's bacon again in her own way. She not only nurses him back to health after he escapes the island there, but she also, her piercing scream is the one of the terror is the one that wakes Hero out of his hypnotized state when he's fighting the glyph there on the ship. So um, let's talk a little bit about Brother Aldo then. Sam, what are your thoughts on Aldo? He kind of comes out almost like a Deus ex machina at one point to save their bacon, but he's quite an interesting character. What did you think?
Yeah, I love Brother Aldo. In fact, he converted me to become an 11er, and that's why I wore the brown shirt.
I see.
Yeah. So I thought he was an important character because he really showed up and kind of does this lore dump and explains some of the big picture stuff that's going on in the world. And I also liked his wizardly powers and appreciated how even more so than Hero, he kind of really stayed his hand when he had to kill and thought carefully about the right of everything to live. Even weird slime creatures, from his perspective,
Yeah.
had a right to live. And so I thought that was a cool aspect of his character.
I like how he almost loses his shit too when he's in the bunker with all the nuclear missiles and things. You can just tell he's like, yeah, it's everything I hate.
Yeah.
He's been so calm the whole way, and then he has to kind of be brought back to earth by a Hero at that stage. But yeah, Steve, what about you? What did you think of Aldo?
Yeah, he was okay. I think I liked the the Eleveners themselves more than him as an individual. What they stood for more than
Hmm.
him. But he was a good representative of what they are, and at times was stoic, and at other times, he was cool too, like he said. So yeah, overall, pretty good character, I would say. I didn't find anything wrong or detracting about him. So
Well, I do. Yeah, I do like I got the kind of feeling of the updated. Well, obviously, there's a lot of uh, elements in play with the Eleveners. For almost like Jesuit priests in a way, but in a much more, I guess, earth-loving way. I also got a kind of Australian Aboriginal vibe from Brother Aldo in a way with his curly hair and his love of nature and things. Yeah, I don't know. There's obviously Lanier was drawing on many different kind of wandering monk kind of traditions, I suppose, for them. But I did like that they had a high knowledge, maybe quite a bit more even than the Brotherhood that Hero represents of what happened in the past and not wanting it to continue or ever come back.
yeah.
Yeah, he was interesting. Well, let's talk about, well, just briefly maybe mention Captain Gimp. What did you guys think of Captain Gimp? He shows up at the tail end of the book, and I felt really bad for him after cleaning out the evil pirates' loot after their kind of agreement, dual agreement, and then he loses it all and his ship there as they, escape into the forest. But what do you guys think of Gimp? He's not a major character, but I thought he was pretty fun. Steve?
Yeah, he's I like that he was adaptable. No matter what the situation was, he wasn't just rigid in his mind, like, I'm the captain, I'm going to do things my way. He was able to be that leader when he needed to be of his men on the ship. But there was other times where he could see reason and be like, okay, there's times where I should defer to Hero because he knows what he knows. And he was really adaptable in the situation. So I like that about him, in addition to his comedic nature.
he had a lot of good oaths to order his men around. I like that,
Oh
calling them
yeah, yeah.
all sorts of off-color things without going into the terrible swear words, but got the impression that he was definitely lashing out with the sailor's tongue. Sam, what about you? What did you think of Gimp?
I thought he was okay. I don't remember him particularly as a standout character. What I kind of think he brought to the table is actually more his crew, because when his crew shows up, now you've got a bunch of red shirts, if you will, and you can have these red shirts get killed off. And now, as I mentioned, the book kind of snowballs and gets more intense toward the end of the book. And I think when his crew shows up toward the end of the book, you can raise the stakes by having a lot more people get killed, these red shirts of his crew. Whereas before, you really couldn't do that because, like, if you kill Hiero, like, oh, that's kind of the end of the book. Now you got these disposable sailors around that you can kind of use to show that things are getting more deadly here, folks. Watch out.
Yeah, and those cheetah-like giant fox creatures carrying one off in each mouth, or
Oh yeah,
each side in their mouth, and fleeting off into the forest. And yeah, others getting picked off while they're on guard duty and such. I think I'm surprised as how few sailors actually bite the dust, but there are still quite a few that. Yeah, that's a good point. The red shirt aspect to
yeah.
kind of reinforce the sheer deadliness of everything, because Hero's been combating that all the way through, right? So. Uh, yeah, well, and let's finish up then with as far as characters go with just the unclean in general. What did you make of the unclean, Sam?
Well, I thought it was interesting that they had the unclean be pale-skinned folk from the United States, and that I think was interesting from an anthropological perspective because if you think about, kind of who is at the forefront of the world, and it's a lot of white European nations, white Russia, kind of white United States that have all the nuclear weapons, and they blow each other up. Then who's kind of left over? It's like the dark skinned people that were kind of out of the fracas, like in Asia and Africa. And he even says that in the book that, part of why there's so many Mets running around is they lived in the rural communities and they didn't get nailed by the nukes and the biological weapons. And the only other time I've ever seen that kind of concept is in the African futurist work of Nnedi Okorafor, who sets her books in far future Africa, where sometimes in her books, that same thing has happened. Kind of the white-led nations have blown themselves up, and so now Africa is kind of this ascendant power. And I just thought that was interesting. And also, it wasn't necessarily that all white people were, bad in the book. I don't think that's what he was trying to say. I think he also had an aspect of these were the people that 5,000 years ago built nuclear weapons, used nuclear weapons, polluted the earth, overpopulated things, were more interested in money than caring for the environment, and kind of led to this global collapse, the death. And 5,000 years later, instead of going, man, we really, we effed up pretty bad and ruined the earth with the death, what should we do? Well, how about nothing different? Let's get some more of that evil technology back. And they never really learned their lesson, which I thought was pretty interesting. Whereas, the Abbey Brotherhood that Hero is a part of and the Eleveners are all kind of a different mind where they realize, man, humanity screwed up pretty bad. We definitely don't want that to happen again.
Yeah, I think the distinct impression that the unclean were using a lot of technology, which takes this out of strict fantasy terms or science fantasy, I guess, into science
Yeah.
fiction. But obviously, Hero was brought to the island, the Dead Isle or whatever, by a submarine. Did you guys get that the feeling there, the way they were describing that ship? It seemed
Yeah.
like a submarine, and they had the ray that hits Hero. I don't know. I mean, obviously, some of it would have been some new science that these guys are, wizardry as well, I guess, that they had come up with. But they were using technology. I even got the feeling, since they all look so similar, did you guys think maybe Lanier was hinting they were clones of some kind?
Okay.
Or they maybe just bald white guys all look alike? I don't know, but anyway, because he mentions that a couple of times how they look the same pretty much, right? They almost all look the same, although they must have some way of telling each other apart. But to have their different Snurg and Stuna and all that names, but because Astuna, or however you pronounce his name, seems to at first Hiero thinks it is Snurg again at first, and I said, I killed this dude. What's this guy doing here? So I just was wondering if there was any element of cloning in there, but who's to say? But what did you make of the unclean, Steve?
I interpreted it a little bit differently than Sam did. I feel like, all the different types of people we have today are not exactly the same ones that were on Earth 5,000 years ago. And I think he was trying to show that 5,000 years after this apocalypse, just like the plants and animals have changed and adapted to their environment, that the humans also would as well. And I feel like the unclean, they're always described as either living underground or in their towers or whatever, like they stay indoors. And even when they do go outdoors, they're cloaked with a hood over them and everything. So I think that's more why I feel like they have lighter skin compared to the other characters that are more outdoorsy, it seems like. And maybe because even like the dark skinned people of the South, like Luchair's people, it sounds like that was more of a deserty area, where today it's more mild climate, but it seems like it's adapted to where that's more of a desert area, and it seems like, yeah, okay, they would adapt to have darker skin as a result of that.
I
So
was
I didn't
thinking it
really,
was described more swamp, more humid climate on the coast
okay,
there, but
yeah. Well, there's points of desert
there's
and that,
definitely a desert heading that direction, though. That's for sure. Yeah.
but I think it was just I didn't see like him trying to take modern day races of people and put them into the future. I think he was just showing where people would evolve into, what he would speculate. That's
Yeah,
how I interpreted it.
yeah, I think there's probably a lot to that because the animals had mutated, so humans have mixed and over time. I wouldn't be surprised if he was thinking of all the politicians in Washington that have their secret bunkers. So if there was a nuclear war, they'd be hidden underground. And these are the unclean are the remnants, the descendants of those people that were the rich and powerful elites that were able to you know hide away under from the nuclear blast and came out afterwards and decided to try to run the world again in their own way of thinking. But they're obviously quite different from contemporary humans as well, as far as their mental abilities, which didn't really go into how they achieved those, but they obviously had some instruments that helped them amplify. There's a lot of talk in the book about mental shields and things, and Hiero being able to detect them and stuff like that. Well, yeah, they're pretty. They made the pretty good bad guy force, I think. Although they had, and I like how Hiero realizes at one point that they're afraid of him. That his mental power has gotten so great that they're sending lots of traps and sending people to catch him and things. But no one's ever escaped their dead isle like he has, and taken over and basically killed one of their adepts mentally, right? When he uses their mind, he ends up killing that one guy just by the shock of having his mind control him to come and release him from the prison cell. But well, let's talk a little bit then about the plot. Sam, what are your thoughts on the plot as far as the obviously it's not super complex, but the general through line of the narrative? What did you make of that?
Well, I really enjoyed all the adventures that he had, and like I said, they were kind of cyclical. So just face value, him encountering all of these mutated creatures was an interesting scenario. But I think you kind of get a peek at what's going on under the hood with kind of this lore dump that you get from
Yeah, we get two lore dumps. We get one from
yeah,
Hiero's kind of a higher up former teacher at the beginning in the second chapter. Although I do like how he gives us some action scene in the first chapter before we get the first info dump, and then we get the one you mentioned from Aldo, right?
Yeah, the start of chapter 9 is pretty important. And I love this quote: God and nature are one, and hence neither is mocked and defied with impunity. Yeah, buddy, that's a good quote. So I think that's kind of what they're getting at, is if you blow up the world, this is what it's like. And in the future, are you going to continue to do things that are destructive with technology, or maybe make some different choices? And, like Steve mentioned, it was really fascinating to see like how everything adapts and changes 5,000 years in the future. And I don't know if you guys have ever read the book, Ridley Walker. I forget the author, but I think he's a UK guy. And that was a good book too, because it shows how everything is like changed in the future. And the whole book is written in this kind of truncated, messed up, misspelled English that shows how society's kind of changed and kind of slid backwards. And it kind of reminded me of what Steve was talking about how earlier, how instead of Canada, it's Candan. It reminds me of Ridley Walker a bit. If you ever get a chance to check that out, you might enjoy it, because it's a little bit more pontificate-y than this book, but the themes kind of seem similar to me.
Well, that's why one of the things I like about this book is the theme is there,
Yep.
but it's not like hammered on you,
Exactly.
So,
It's
and
action.
if you wrote this in '73, if you think about it, it's a few years after the first Earth Day. It was in the people's minds. That's when I think Rachel Carlson's book came out a little earlier, and Silent Spring or whatever. And there was a lot of thinking at that time. I don't know if you guys know this British TV series Doom Watch, where these two guys, scientists, were writing. It's a really cool series. They were coming up with all the ways that humans were messing up the planet, and how it was coming back to bite them in the ass and stuff. So I'm sure that was in his mind, but I didn't find it overly preachy particularly. What about you, Steve? Themes or messages? Did you or just any thoughts on the plot itself?
Yeah. You guys, when they get to the final bunker at the end, did you guys get the opinion that was in around the Pittsburgh area?
I didn't have a clear. I mean, Chicago, Pittsburgh could have been. It's somewhere on the south of the inland sea, right? So to the
Yeah,
east, maybe. So it could have been Pittsburgh. Yeah, I didn't. The map, and they do, again. Gotta love a book with the map. They do have a map in
yeah.
here.
You guys have a map?
It's not
Did
going
you
to
get a
show
map in
well.
yours, Sam?
I don't, and also I've got the inferior cover art too. But,
Yeah, the cover art really sucks. It makes it look like it's another case of conscience or something. But
well, I got the email from you to do this right after I walked in the door from a book haul and spent a ton of money on books, and I was like, okay, I just spent all this money. I better get like the cheapest version I can. But yeah, you guys have the you got the.
well, that's cool that you got that they actually put it out in a Masterworks, though. That's very cool.
Yeah,
I think
it's affordable at least. But yeah,
sorry, Steve, you were saying about the map, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I just think it's not going to show real well on this, for the viewers. But from what it looks like, the way the Great Lakes would be, it looks like that dead city they found would be right around the Pittsburgh area to me. And I find that interesting because currently they don't have any like major military installations right there. But during the Cold War, they did. In and around the area, there was thoughts that Pittsburgh could be bombed, so they actually had missile capable areas around the city. And one of the suburbs there is like Oakdale or something like that. There was a major one, and I was wondering if maybe that wasn't it, because he wrote this in '73 when the Cold War was going on. So I was wondering if maybe that wasn't the facility that they stumbled upon. And also, right at that time, in the '70s, they were building a nuclear plant, Beaver Creek or Beaver River or something like that, right outside of Pittsburgh. it was under construction at the time. So I think maybe that might have been influencing on him on how, okay, here we're building up in this Pittsburgh area this missile capabilities and putting a nuclear plant right here. I'm wondering if maybe that influenced why he chose that specific area for the bunker that they found.
That's as good a theory as any I could have come up with. Yeah,
Yeah,
I didn't
good
actually
history
think of
lesson,
a. Yeah, that's good. I didn't. It could very well be. He would probably have known about that or read about that in some journal or something or newspaper. So I don't. I'm not up enough on that area to have come to that conclusion, but it makes complete sense. I just figured it was just to some bunker somewhere that had that. I was a little vague on exactly what contemporary place would have, other than obviously the inland sea being the Great Lakes joined together, of course, but and Dalwa obviously being supposed to be somewhere in Delaware, and of course, what's the city of iniquity there? What was the name of that city? That they had one. That's where Luchar had been sold into slavery. Where was that city? On, dang it, Neana. That's it, Indiana. Neana. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So, I wonder if he was making a subtle slap on on Indiana himself. But anyway, yeah. Well, I think if we go through the plot, what do you think about the Abbeys wanting to get their hands on a computer? I know some readers on Goodread in their reviews thought that was kind of a silly idea, but I'm not quite so sure. What did you guys think about that as a through line? That his quest is to get to the city and try to find a computer, and Luchar's finding the manuals of how to build or work a computer seemed a little convenient. But I thought at first that her package that she'd be clutching so closely would have been an actual computer itself, but what did you think of that as a through line quest plot line there, Sam?
It felt a little bit of an arbitrary MacGuffin just because the narrative didn't really weave in why the computer was necessarily important. We just kind of told that. If we kind of saw that, well, maybe we did kind of see that, they use these devices, especially the unclean, to kind of amplify their psychic abilities. And so if there was just maybe a little more world building to kind of show that, yeah, if we have a computer, we can amplify our psychic abilities and we'll survive. I think what he did say was that with the computer, they could use it to run tactical analyses that would help them fight the unclean. But, I didn't really have any major problem with it. It worked for me. And honestly, despite all the devastation, destruction, I would consider this book utopia because there's no Windows 11 or Microsoft in this future. They can take this and they can build an operating system that works for people and have a good time using computers. So I liked it a lot.
Yeah, I did get the impression, like you say, running tactical analysis, and maybe they were worried about infiltration by the unclean and the spreading of the unclean, and they wanted to come up with some way how a computer exactly would be used to that benefit. Wasn't really gone into, and I guess, like you say, it wasn't really important. It was just a means to an end to get Hiero down into the danger zone, basically. But what do you think, Steve?
Well, when he wrote this in 73, weren't computers like the size of an entire room at the time? So was he predicting that computers would actually shrink down in size, ahead of time before they actually did? Because
well, I'm
you
not
would
sure by where they
assume,
were in the 70s. Maybe they weren't quite so big, but they were probably down to room size anyway.
yeah.
Instead of building size.
Well,
Yeah,
I
he
thought
might
that
have been.
was,
Yeah, that's a good point. I hadn't thought of it that way. Yeah, I think he's obviously figuring that the nuclear destruction would have happened several years down the pike from where he was writing, but that it would have happened you know
and
uh,
also was he kind of foreshadowing that, okay, now humans are going to get a hold of this computer technology again, and even though the Brotherhood has good intentions with it, is this now the beginning of their next destructive phase? by starting all over again with computers. You know,
I didn't get that read on it because Brother Aldo didn't seem overly concerned about them building a computer, but at least at this stage. But I don't know, Sam, did you think that maybe that was a cyclical thing being implied there? That's an interesting point, Steve. I didn't get that read on it myself, but
Well, I think what Steve's talking about with the cyclical thing is that's what the unclean is trying to do. So they haven't learned their lesson from history, and so they're trying to repeat this cycle of destruction. And what the Eleveners and the Abbey want to do is to prevent that, and that's why they want to use the computer to kind of to stop that.
well, I'm kind of surprised that the unclean haven't went after computers themselves. That seems like something they would have sent out at least a Lemute crew to try to find. But yeah, well, that's and they don't seem to, I guess, have computers, but they obviously have some because they were. Was the airborne, the earlier encounter, mental encounter that Hiero has when he's using that kind of far casting stick thing that he hooks up with? Was that implied to be a glider, guys, or were you thinking it was an actual jet aircraft that they were using? I didn't get a sense that it was loud, but there was the aircraft because he thought he was trying to get into some bird's eyes to see the layout of the land, and then he has that one brief encounter with one of the unclean in the sky. So did you get an impression that was a glider or another kind of aircraft?
drone, maybe?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, obviously they have instrumentation and technology of many kinds, but it's not implied that they have computers exactly, but it's also not implied that they don't. But I know Hiero is worried at the end if unclean get down there. Well, okay, let's go through a few other things first. So let's talk about the Hiero's encounter with Snurg, the first unclean that he meets. What did you guys think when you're with that first encounter with an unclean, and how Hiero and of course we talked a bit about Gorm going for the privates maybe, but and then a very quick and throat slitting of the bad guy on Hiero's part. But well, I guess we don't have to focus on that, but any high point set pieces you want to talk about? We had the encounter with the Dweller in the Mist. We had the Hiero being captive on the Isle of the Dead and his escape, which is pretty exciting escape, I think, the way they handle that personally. And then we have going on the shipboard elements there, and then we have the forest and the encounter with the sexy dryads of the trees in there, and then the encounter with the house, which I thought was a very interesting creature, and then the finale where basically Hiero takes out two crows with one stone, so to speak, at the end. Any particular set pieces of the book that stood out to you, Steve?
Well, I think the initial encounter with Snurg was kind of there to demonstrate how intelligent Gorm could be. Because right when the guy shows up, Hiero looks around and Gorm's gone. And he's like,
Yeah.
oh man, the bear abandoned me,
Yeah.
But it turns out that he was intelligent enough and had the foresight to get away out of sight and then come up behind him and show just how smart of a bear he really was. But yeah, that, and I agree that escape from the Dead Isle was pretty awesome. I really enjoyed that.
And the trying to get away, not only getting out there in the battle with the Cheechak, was that it? The kind of Lemute ape creature or whatever, but then getting away on the boat, being pursued by the giant worm creatures and things. So what about later in the book? What did you make of the encounter with the what is her name? The forest queen lady that has her way with Hiero there. What did you think of that section of the book?
Yeah, that was interesting. I like that, all of the crew of the ship, they all
Even the
got some
grandfather
too.
got some
You
action.
know, if you
Yeah.
look at it, the dream,
I wonder which of the
yeah,
women drew
because
the
they woke
short
up and
straw
he's
for
like,
the
"Oh, isn't that
grandfather.
interesting?" They're like, "Isn't this kind of interesting that all these sailors have woken up and they're not even interested in the women?" Well, that's because they were relieved during the night. So,
Yeah. And
yeah,
interesting that it was presented as a dream to them.
yeah.
That's an unusual way to do. Obviously, it was meant to be real, but they were under some sort of stupor or something. I didn't quite get how that was achieved, but anyway, and I just thinking, Luchar, was she watching a Hero at some stage doing that? I don't know, but it's a very interesting sideline, but unique creatures. I like that.
Yeah, yeah.
What about the ending, Steve? The in the bunker. What did you think of how that was arranged? Did that come off a little too convenient, or did that seem like a fitting way to wrap things up?
It was okay. I mean, they even said like there's a very minimal chance this plan is going to work, but it did work. So
Yeah,
it's like, okay, that's kind of convenient that it did happen to work, but it shows that Hero had thought out this plan of, okay, I'm going to get this bad guy to fight against this bad guy, and that'll allow us to sneak out. And he made it work. So it was cool. It was, I mean, he's meant to be a hero, and that's the sort of thing that heroes do, is come up with those solutions
yeah,
to solve the
yeah. He's
situation they're in. So.
he's presented as pretty resourceful, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Sam, how about you? Any moments throughout the book or set pieces that stood out to you?
The grand finale for sure when they're in the bunker. And so, like I said, it felt like the book was all building up to that moment where now you've got this massive underground bunker full of nuclear missiles, and you've got all your characters running around trying to find the computer frantically while the unclean army shows up to come in. And then also the bunker is infested with the slime creatures from the house. And how are you going to get out of this alive and with the computer? And the scene where they're all running past the mesmerized unclean that are locked in the battle with the slime people was just great. And I loved the ending. I thought it was so well done. Yeah.
Were you disappointed that Hero's nemesis Estuna wasn't there? Or because you think he'd be there, you want to be there in for the kill, but is he being smart again and sending in a bunch of red shirts to kind of and then wait to have Hero at his mercy later? I thought he doesn't, the main antagonist doesn't get taken out in this one, so. And I can't even remember if he even appears in the second one. So I'm sure he must, but it's been so long. But did you have any disappointment over that, or did you just figure it was, since there's a second book, that it would be something resolved later? Or
No, none. I mean, basically, the unclean to me kind of felt like interchangeable. And I kind of forgot that, oh, yeah, he had this beef with the guy that captured him on the Isle of the Dead that was never resolved, and kind of forgot about that until you just mentioned it, honestly. But, most of the encounters that Hero had wound up with them being defeated by Hero on the spot. And so, if one gets away for a fight another day, that's all right.
Steve, how about you? Did you have any thoughts about the not settling the score with the main bad guy there?
Well, it's unlikely that you're going to completely eliminate an enemy that's as big of a threat as the unclean are all in one fell swoop. So yeah, I think it was done right to leave some of them alive in the potential that later on there could still be danger. Because if they had just killed the complete threat in
Oh,
just
yeah.
completely got rid of all the unclean all at once, it would have been like, okay, that's a little unlikely to me.
Yeah, I didn't think he was going for that at all, but I just was interested in that, there could have been even a more superior force that he would have to encounter later. I'm wondering if Lanier had plans for writing more at this stage or not. I don't get the indication. I mean, he leaves the book. The book ends somewhat abruptly, I suppose, although in a good space, but where they've just escaped that, and they've got the manuals, and they're off to the next stage. But I'm wondering when he wrote this if he expected it would be, because back then it wasn't a guarantee that anything was going to be nowadays so many books come out and it's obviously setting up a series or a trilogy or whatever, and I don't know if that was the case when he published this. So especially not being overly prolific guy. So
Does the
yeah.
does the computer factor in the second book? Is that like a big part of it?
I don't think so. I can't remember at all. The biggest thing is, well, I don't want to spoil it for you guys at all, but let's just say that this creature here is a key player at the end of this book. So, and it's I don't believe the computer factors much at all. I think it's just it's interesting. The book starts with Hiero and Luchar in Dalwa, back in her home area. So, and then the plot moves on from there, and it's got a bunch of new cool creatures that he encounters and things. So, including the creature on the cover. I wanted to ask you a little bit about your thoughts on the world building. I know Steve very and very smartly commented that the world that Lanier creates is a big character in the book. And do you have any particular aspects or creatures that you? I mean, there's scads and almost uncountable numbers of creatures they encounter in this, which I really enjoyed. But did you have any particular favorites? Besides there's the evil races, the Lemutes, and there's some races that are hinted at. And I love, again, I don't know if you have this in your copy, Sam, but Steve has the glossary in the back of creatures and areas. Yeah, that's good. So we don't really encounter the dam people, the highly intelligent race of beaver people here. And that's a little disappointing, I suppose. They're hinted at as not wanting much to do with humans, kind of being neutral characters. But what did you have? Excuse me, any particular beasties that stood out to you besides, of course, Gorm and Klutz, but the ones they encounter along the way, Steve?
I love the gigantic animals, like the frogs. It sounds like the giant frogs they run into are like the size of a library. And they're like, oh boy, we're going to get eaten. Then it turns out it finds out another frog to go fight or mate with or whatever. So it gets distracted by this other gigantic frog. But I like them. And then the giant sea creatures. There's like fish that are just monstrous out there. And in the descriptions of them was like, oh yeah, that sounds really cool. Like,
what about
the size of a whale?
Yeah, isn't there a massive thing? He sees a fin waiting, and when they're going through polling through the dead city, and there's this empty, I guess, like a hollowed out building, and there's this giant fin, and something's lurking there. And then they make the mention of this thing that's controlling. Brother Aldo says this thing that's the controller or king of these frog creatures, but we never see what it is, So yeah, some massive creatures, that's for sure. Anything else, Steve? That
I don't know.
the snappers the size of Volkswagen bugs.
Yeah, the snappers are cool too. Yeah, all the creatures were interesting. Yeah, there was nothing bad. So,
How about you, Sam?
I really liked the slime creatures that were kind of devouring and corroding away the forest of the Dryad women.
The house. Yeah, that was really interesting.
Yeah. I thought that was, creepy and disgusting. And my favorite set piece was the ruined city that they had to like paddle through on the raft. That was just very ambient and kind of creepy and macabre. I like that a lot.
Yeah, he really communicates the how it looked like the broken windows were staring down at them, and Hiero knows something's watching them and lurking in the corners. And just the whole ghostly dead city, and they want out of there as quick as possible. Yeah, I think the world building is first class in this book, really. I think the whether these creatures would ever be able to mutate to that extent in 5,000 years is maybe pushing the science a little bit, but I'm willing to go with it. That's I get strong Thundar the Barbarian vibes in some parts of that, with, if any of you watch that show, that cartoon growing up, with all the beast men and such, and the post-apocalyptic Earth. But
I'll have to check that out because I like He-Man and She-Ra, so I'll have to check
oh
out.
yeah, you'll like this then.
Dragon.
It's from the
Yeah.
same Ruby Spears house. This
Mm.
came out in the early '80s, I think, and '81. And I was watching it right when I got the 1-2 punch of Thunder the Barbarian on Saturday mornings and seeing Raiders of the Lost Ark for the first time in my,
Oh, nice.
my what would have been 14-year-old, 13-year-old mind being blown. So that was yeah. So I think of course this would have predated that, but it might even been an inspiration. I know it's cited as inspiration, especially maybe the telekinetic and telepathic aspect for what is it, the appendix N for D&D, for Dungeons and
Yeah.
Dragons. I guess that it's one of those keystone works apparently. Well, any other thoughts on the world building before we move on to the prose? What did you think of Lanier's writing style, Steve?
Oh, he's got good writing style. It's easy to digest, but it's still descriptive and very thorough. I would also point out for the world building, there's two other books I would recommend for people that like this one. One that came out around the same time was M. John Harrison's The Pastel City.
Oh, that's a good one. Yeah, man.
Yeah,
I haven't read that.
I didn't care for the rest of the Variconium books, but The Pastel City itself, I think there's a lot in common with this book in a way. And then the other one is James Stoddard's retelling of the Nightland.
Mm-hmm.
It's the adventure.
I have that on my Kindle after your review. Yeah.
Yeah, you did great on that, Steve.
I think the Nightland's better than Hero's Journey by a little bit, but similar in a lot of ways for that just fascinating world building in that. So I think fans of this book will like those as well.
Well, a similar kind of quest through a pretty dangerous environment, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and it's possible even that had some impact on Lanier for all we know. I don't know about that. But how about you, Sam? What did you think of the prose?
The prose didn't stand out to me as like, poor or especially good. It was just, straightforward prose, kind of describing the action. Occasionally you get like a really good quote that would be like, wow, that was amazing. But for the most part, I found the prose straightforward and I liked it just fine. And, even though I'm not a big fan of lore dumps in books, I kind of felt like when there was a lore dump in this book, it was earned, like his mentor monk, like telling him about the world, or Aldo the Elevener showing up and kind of letting everybody know what the Elevener has been working on. So yeah, it worked.
And it's mostly limited to those 2 times, right? Yeah. So it doesn't really overstay its welcome, which is good. So as info dumps go, it's pretty well handled. Yeah, I think where he excels is perhaps not in dialogue or anything, but his descriptive powers of describing the landscape and the creatures are quite good, I think. So that's probably where his strengths lie. Okay, well, let's get to the kind of wrapping up this thing. So let's talk about your overall, I guess, positives that what you would list as the things you like the most. Some of it you've already touched on, but if you want to reiterate that, Steve, you want to go through your likes of this book? What struck you as the big positives?
Well, we touched on most of it, but I think the world building was extremely well done. That's the best part of this. Just the whole concept of it. Okay, maybe the prose, like Sam said, isn't the best, but he created a world that was interesting and made you want to keep reading it and see what's going to happen next. What are they going to run into? What challenges are they going to face? So he did a good job at keeping your interest in it.
Okay, how about you, Sam?
Yeah, I mean, the title says it all, A Hero's Journey. This is about a hero. There's not a hero doing villainous acts or having, self-doubt or anything really like that too deep. It's just a good person trying to do good in the world and having a lot of bizarre adventures doing it. Clean cut, straightforward, classic. I loved it.
Well, I like also how the telepathic communications were handled. I think, like when he the way they showed the more simplified Klutz one, where it's more kind of cut in pieces, piecemeal, with kind of in parentheses, you know, uh, worried feeling or something like that, and then it starts off that way with Gorm, and gets, as they communicate more and more, it gets more just straightforward communication mentally, and of course,
Yeah.
and how they use italics, of course, to show that it's mental speech, etc. So, yeah, I think, yeah, I of course I like the character of Hiero, but and the quest aspect, and that there's plenty of action as well. So it's got a pretty good pace, even though, some parts of it are longer, you'd feel longer than others, like going through the swamp, or maybe some parts could have been, we maybe didn't need the whole forest dryad lady section there, although I enjoyed that quite a bit, but it maybe you could have cut it out without really affecting the narrative a whole lot. They could have went right to the house or whatever, but just the sheer imagination on display from Lanier's wacky brain. Obviously, he has huge amount of interests in natural history and anthropology and things, and he was mixing it together in a really interesting way. And yeah, and just I would, yeah, the whole world and all the creatures, of course, that's what struck me as a teenager reading this, is I've was always loved monsters and things and animals, so having them combine, he's got animal pals and he's fighting weird beast men and stuff, so it was right up my alley then, and it still is now, because I still have my inner 13-year-old easily engaged in that kind of thing. Well, how about we talked a little bit also about some things we didn't like, but do you want to reiterate some of the negatives, Steve, for you?
There wasn't any negatives that were like deal breakers for me. Overall, the pace, like we've discussed, the pace could have been a little better at times, but beyond that, it was pretty good. I can't think of any real dislike negatives I had in it.
Sam, how about you?
Ditto, same thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think we talked about a little bit clumsiness perhaps with the early stages of the Luchar Hiero relationship, and you guys mentioned how you thought it was maybe a little overlong. So okay, well, Steve, I know you do ratings. Sam, do you give number star ratings to your books?
Yep. So I do 0 to 5 stars, and if I think a book is really exceptional, I'll give it a 5-star God tier rating.
Oh,
Which,
that's
by the
right,
way,
the God tier. That's right.
And by the way, Steve mentioned that book, The Pastel City. That one got a 5-star God tier rating for me. So I
Wow.
second his nomination in that. Yeah.
All right. Well, I'll have to look into that. I've heard of M. John Harrison in is it Viraconia, or whatever,
Yeah.
the sequence or whatever, but I've never read any of them. So
Yeah, but like Steve said, don't worry about the books after that.
Okay.
He
Just
goes
stop
off
there.
Yeah, he goes off the deep end with this really psychedelic, tripped out, extremely purple prose. I think you can just read Pastel City and call it a day.
Yeah, I'm not a huge surrealist fan, so I'll if as long as it ends in a good stage right there, that might be enough. Well, Sam, you want to give Hero's Journey a rating?
Yeah, 4 out of 5 stars, which puts it in the good category. A solid read. I liked it.
Yeah, well, that seems pretty good. Yeah. How about you, Steve? You do out of 10, I know. So what would you give
Yeah,
Hero's Journey?
I give this one an 8.5 out of 10. It's not quite in that 9 or above, but it's good. It's really good. I'm definitely going to reread this again one day.
And I was taking you both would be interested in reading the next one anyway, then at some stage.
Sure.
Yeah, and I'd also really like to check out Brigadier Fellows as well, because when I think about his body of work, that's the one that really makes me go, "Oh man, like that sounds so cool." And
and they are very cool. Yeah, boy, yeah. There's some
have
stories
that
there
one.
you'll go, "Holy cow, what a great idea!"
Yeah, I don't have that one yet. I don't have the sequel to this either, but I think that's an SF Masterworks that cheap.
Yeah, so that shouldn't be too hard to find. Brigadier Fellows, this one is not cheap online, I don't think.
Yeah.
But you could find an ebook version. The ebook version I have of the second one, the Curious Quests, it's got some typos, but it's fine. And I've read a couple of stories out of that, and the quality is maintained. So it's yeah, those are probably his best work as far as writing, because he has these great ideas. It's but basically the brigadier is there's a New York City club, and like there always is, there's a boorish individual who always is annoyed by fellows and kind of taunts him into telling a story, and then everyone else is like, shut up, dude, but then when he tells the story, everyone's captivated, and the other guys kind of wandered off, real, because the brigadier is like a British guy, but he's living in America, and he's very calm and telling some really hair-raising tales. He's just I don't want to spoil anything for you, because they're just some crazy ideas that I definitely recommend you seek those out if you can. And maybe down the line we can even do a buddy read on this sometime.
Yeah, I've got that one. And I don't have the weak sauce cover of this one, but I've got the same edition Jeff has from Medicine to Marchwood. So
this is another Daryl K. Sweet cover.
Yeah, I got that exact edition. I found it on a book haul a while ago.
I don't think it's a necessary work like the Hiero books, but it's a cool book. So I think, and of course, there's so little written by the guy, that I have a lot of nostalgia for this, and so I would rate it pretty highly. But I can see it has some imperfections and things, but for what it is, I thought it was a really fun book. Well, I just want to finish up, guys, with talking a little bit about Hero's Answer, which was written by Lanier's goddaughter. Like I mentioned earlier on in the biography of Lanier, he had difficulty concentrating after his car accident. I don't know if he had a skull injury or what exactly it was, must have, which perhaps even led to him having strokes down the road. But he apparently had, well, I'll just read. In searching about him, I found, and why was there never a third book? I was taken to a website that had in the comments, because the guy was talking about Hero's journey in Unforsaken Hero, and then his goddaughter commented down on it. This was in 2020, and said that she was working on, she had completed his the final one. Hero's Answer is what she calls it, because she wants to wrap up some of the questions. So I'll just read a little bit of her comment and then the follow-up on that. So again, her name is Lucy Andrews Cummins, so that must be her married name. I'm the goddaughter, and by coincidence, a goddaughter of Lanier, and I have recently finished, this is in 2020, a final edit of the last book, Hero's Answer. Orion has expressed a strong interest in reprinting book one, and the second in mine is ebooks. Now that has since moved on. I believe it's Blackgate Books that's putting out the ebook version. I'm not 100% sure, but actually a physical version too, perhaps. So Tor Ahem turned down the whole enterprise, she said. No counting of chickens, etc. But for by now, Orion may have changed their minds, as this edit took an unconscionably long time. Sterling died of a stroke, but was originally injured in the 80s in a traffic accident in Vienna and was unconscious for over a week. When he recovered, which he never really did, sadly, he could not concentrate for long without getting ferocious headaches. From him, I had 70 pages, so I'm assuming the first 70 pages, and a very, very sketchy bit of what can't quite be called an outline, more like thoughts. But I took what I had and ran. Sterling had a more or less eidetic memory and great imagination, so one of the challenges for me was reading through his reference library for ideas, inspiration, and information. His workroom, a repurposed and rather mildewed greenhouse shop attached to the house, was full of his books, and on visits I got to work at the same kitchen table from his childhood home where he liked to sit and write.
Wow, that's cool.
The temptations in that room often won. Who could ever resist a pile of cryptozoology magazines? Not me. Overall, the biggest challenge was bringing the whole story into the 21st century. Much has changed. There are several strong and developed women characters balancing the men somewhat in her final book. And everyone involved is transformed by their experiences in some way. I worked hard to retain that light touch and sheer fun, and to include as many of the characters as I could, and of course to resolve as many unanswered questions as I could, thus the title, Hero's Answer. No doubt some will loathe what I have done. I can only say I've worked hard to both preserve the verve of his writing while being true to my own writerly self. All of my friend readers have been enthusiastic, which has given me the strength to keep the project alive and see it through. If you want to check out Sterling Lanier's library, I cataloged all but a few shelves of his books at his legacy library at Library Thing. Do you guys know Library Thing, the site where you can log your books and stuff? under his full name, Sterling E. Lanier. He wrote copiously in his books, and I tried to capture the best of them, often very critical, said the editor and him coming out, I guess. They bring him to life, his comments, I guess. I am also findable at library, blah, blah, blah. Okay. And finally, also, I hope you, she talks about how she didn't like how what Orion was doing with the ebook and asked them to withdraw it, etc. So then I tried to find out what happened to this book because it never appeared in 2020. And apparently it's scheduled for ebook release on September 4th, 2025. So this year it was postponed from last year. Published by Gateway Publishing, according to the website Sanctum Secorum. And it's they are the people behind the SF Masterworks. So I guess since they put out his first two, and I guess whether they'll put out a Masterworks, I doubt they'll put out a Masterworks version of her book, but they'll at least until it proves itself. But anyway, it was originally supposed to come out September 14th, 2024, so it's pushed back a year. But I think that's pretty cool. Whether how she'll do. But, I'm definitely going to check it out because at least the first 70 pages are going to be probably mostly Lanier. And, we'll have to get through the second book before tackling that one. But what do you guys think about that there's an actual third one after all these years to kind of cap it off? Any thoughts on that, Sam?
Yeah, sounds fun. I would definitely check it out, and even if it isn't like exactly the same as Lanier's style of work, I think that's okay. Taking something and running with it is pretty interesting, and it reminds me a bit of a book I want to read where the original Dying Earth quadrilogy ended in book 2 for a long time, and there was this author, I forget his name, but he contacted Jack Vance and was like, hey, do you mind if I write a continuation to the Kugel stories? And Jack Vance was like, sure. And so that book is called The Quest for Symbolists, and I've always kind of wanted to read that to see what another author does with somebody's IP. And this kind of sounds like a similar thing where, I'd love to see what she's got going on with this.
Usually that kind of thing bothers me when it's not the original author. But in this case, there's no other way to get around it. We can't resurrect Mr. Lanier and have him write the rest of his book there. So, Steve, what do you think about this? Would you be interested in reading this conclusion?
Oh, yeah. My only concern is that it won't come out physically.
Yeah, you don't do. Yeah. I wonder if there'd be some sort of PDF way to make that happen. I don't know if it won't come out physically. Maybe it will eventually. I don't know. That's it. Like at least on a print on demand way. But I think doing the first two would be enough for a while, and we could always eventually share our thoughts on the third one down the road. So, any other final thoughts on Hiero's journey, guys, before we wrap this up? Any last comments about anything that we didn't cover? I think we did a pretty thorough job on it, while still leaving enough fun stuff for people to discover on their own, I hope.
Oh, it's a good book. Anybody that's into this fantasy or science fiction should check it out. And there is a lot more we haven't talked about. There is really a lot packed in the 300 pages in this book. So I would recommend it for fans of this genre myself.
Sam?
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. A good clean-cut hero doing the right thing in an interesting world. I loved it. Had a good time.
And some fun companions. Got to have some fun companions when you're on a quest. Yeah.
Gorm's the man. Actually, I think that they should have had a girlfriend for Gorm instead. I think that
I can't remember in the second book, but something like that might happen. I don't know. But second book is quite different in some ways, but still more of the same, which is in a lot of good ways. So, hopefully we'll come back and talk about this one somewhere down the pike when we all have some more time to meet up. I just want to finish up with anything you want to mention, upcoming projects for your channel, anything you're working on now, or that planning to have some videos that are going to be appearing soon. Steve, how about you? You have, I know you've been doing a slew of buddy reads this month. This is just one of many. So you have some fun stuff coming up?
Yeah, I'm
I'm sure.
participating in Indie Author August. So Kevin Toll reads, started it, and Nicole's Bookish Nook is going to be a co-host with it, and they want us to read something published by indie authors. So I actually found a few of our fellow booktubers their books, and I'm going to be reading them.
Yeah.
That, and then September, there's going to be a shorty September, which are novels under 200 pages. So I was like, ooh, that sounds good. I like little quick shorties you can just bang out real quick. So,
Oh, the older I get, the more I love that. Under
yes.
200 pages has got my name on it.
Yep.
Cool. Well, are you going to participate in any of this Michael K. Vaughan's Sumerian September, Robert E. Howard stuff? Steve,
No,
are you going to?
I haven't even looked into it, so I don't know. Maybe I will. I always have some Robert E. Howard laying around I can sneak in if I wanted to. So
Well, I like
we'll
these
see.
BookTube events, but I'm kind of BookTube evented out for a while, probably. I mean,
Well,
I'm doing the read along with for the Elric thing is fun because it's just one book at a time. But Garb August looks fun, and I like the people doing it, but I have a little uh, problem calling the stuff I like garbage or trash, So I know that they mean it in a positive way, and it just meaning escapist literature, but something still kind of rankles to me about it a little bit. So uh, I'll listen and watch the podcast, talk some of them talking about those books, and I'm not saying they're trashy books. Certainly anything by Jacqueline Suzanne, I would count it as trashy. But um, I don't think Doc Savage or Edgar Rice Burroughs is trash. So or Robert E. Howard. So um, maybe Easy Company could certainly be put in there for sure. But yeah. So I have a little bit of I don't have a problem with it for other people, but it's not something I want to do. But I might jump into Sumerian September. How about you, Sam? You got anything fun coming up? I'm sure you have some stuff that irons in the fire
Yeah, right now I'm
there.
reading Overlords of War, which is a vintage science fiction book from the 70s, written by a French author, Gerard Klein, translated by John Brunner. And that's good.
Oh,
And then I'm doing this diversity reading challenge,
right. You
and
mentioned
August
that.
is Intersectionality Awareness Month. And I didn't even
Right.
know what that was until I started this challenge. But basically, it's like how all the different aspects of your identity make you who you are. And I'm going to be reading these 1940s comics that feature the first Chinese American superhero ever. Yeah, and then Gerald Luen Yang, I think is his name. He writes modern graphic novels. He did a modern retelling of that first Chinese American superhero. So the hero is called the Green Turtle, and the modern retelling is the Shadow Hero. So that sounds fun to me, reading that old stuff. And then
Shadow Hero sounds a little more badass than the Green Turtle, I guess. Oh,
yeah,
it's the Green Turtle,
that is the Green Turtle who,
run!
but
Yeah.
it's a compendium of those original comics from the 1940s, and it's
Cool.
like Captain America, but it's a Chinese American guy, punching Nazis and Japanese soldiers. So we'll give
That
that a
should be
whirl.
cool.
And then
That
the
should
other
be
big
cool.
thing is that novella I mentioned, the Book of Diogenesis that I'm writing, should be coming out soon because I finally got the cover art back from the illustrator, and I'm scanning it over on my computer and fiddling with the settings to get that going to release on Amazon. That'll be ebook, and I'm with Steve. I prefer physical media, and so my plan is to release it as a paperback and a hardback too. And it's short too. It's not a long honking read, so that'll be fun too.
Well, I'll be interested in checking that out for sure. Yeah, that's cool. Um, yeah, well, I'll wait for you to go into more detail on when you do a video about it when it's closer to coming out. Don't want to jinx anything till it's out. I know
Yeah,
authors hate to share too much plot detail to derail their
yeah.
their
I'll
work.
tell you if you want to hear. It's up to you, but I know we're
Well, maybe we'll do that off air real quick. But anyway, I think this was a lot of fun, and I hope we can do it again. I appreciate you guys taking the time to not only read this book, but carve time out of your surely busy schedules to talk about this. And I know Steve had to go to extra trouble to find a a place to record that where he wasn't broiling in his van. So, so
Looks like a nice park, though. I spent some time down south in the military, and it's beautiful down there.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm outside year round, so it doesn't bother me.
sorry, Steve, you froze a
Looked
little
like I
bit there. You
froze
want to
there
start?
for a minute.
Yeah, you did. You want to
Yeah.
start over again there, so I can snip around the freezing. So you were saying you live outdoors every year. You want to start from that?
Yeah, I'm outside year round, so it doesn't matter to me being out here. It's a good time being able to talk to you guys. So I was glad we can do this.
Yeah, likewise.
Yeah, well, thanks for doing that. And I think it's so cool what you're doing in your life. It's such a, an unusual thing for the average person. Like, I'm here in my air conditioned space,
Yeah.
and thank God for that, because it is 100 degrees and high humidity here in Osaka. But I don't know how the weather is where you are, Steve, but I'm sure it's pretty hot.
Oh,
But
it's like living on the surface of the sun. But there's actually
you've
something
adapted clearly.
you'd be pretty interested because you asked me last time. I actually had a bear encounter a couple
Oh, wow.
weeks ago.
Wow.
There was a little black bear about 5 feet from my cabin,
Did he
and
stand up and put
unfortunately,
his paw up?
well, I was going to make buddies with him. I would have been cool with that. But unfortunately, when he recognized me, he went running off into the woods. So, but yeah, he was about 150, 180 pounds, so like the size of a pretty big Rottweiler. So
About the
maybe young.
size of Gorm. Did you
Oh yeah,
establish any telepathic link?
I'm going to try to from now on.
Yeah, he might be back. Wow, that's cool.
Yeah.
How about snakes? I know you're a little worried about snakes creeping up under in the warmth of your cabin there.
Oh, constantly. I don't mind the constrictors. They're perfectly fine. They're my all natural rodent control. But at night the copperheads come out.
Yeah.
And they are concerning because you can barely see at night, and that's when they'll bite you. So
Yeesh.
yeah,
Oh,
don't care for the copperheads.
you're a better man than I am, Gunga Din, that's for sure. All right, guys. Well, thanks a bunch for this, and I'm
Yeah,
gonna
thank you. Thank you both.
we'll bring it to a close. Really enjoy what you're doing on your channels, and good luck with the future endeavors there. And let's stay in touch and do this again, maybe towards the end of the year or early next with the Unforsaken Hero, if you're down for it.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah,
totally.
for sure. Yeah.
All right. All right, guys. See you later. Take care.
All right, thank you both.
Here.